What if the person who judged you, humiliated you, and treated you like a criminal never knew who you truly were? What if the person who had the power to ruin your future couldn't even see your potential? This is the story of Tyrell Thompson, a 17-year-old high school senior who faced the very system that was supposed to protect him, but instead tried to break him. One fateful encounter with a police officer, one moment of misjudgment and unfair treatment, would turn into a defining moment for him, showing the world that being underestimated is not a curse, but a blessing in disguise. Tyrell Thompson was no ordinary teenager. At 17 years old, he had already seen more challenges than most people did in a lifetime. Tyrell was a 6'3", athletic young man with the build of a football player, his muscles honed by years of practice and hard work. But more than his physical attributes, it was his heart that set him apart. Growing up in one of the most economically challenged neighborhoods in the city, Tyrell knew the weight of the world was on his shoulders. His mother, a single parent, had worked 2 jobs just to make sure that he had the opportunity to attend school and follow his dreams. Tyrell's passion was football. He had always dreamed of playing professionally, but there were those who doubted him at every step of the way. The system, the school system, the coaches, and even the community around him, they were all eager to place him in the same box as every other kid in his neighborhood: lazy, unambitious, and headed for failure. But Tyrell, with every drop of sweat he poured into the field and every sacrifice he made in his personal life, proved them wrong. He had earned a full scholarship to the University of Alabama, a major feat for someone from his background. He was on the verge of greatness, but little did he know, one encounter would almost derail his entire future. Officer Kevin Daniels, on the other hand, had spent nearly 15 years as a member of the city's police force. In his 40s, with a square jaw, sharp features, and cold eyes, Daniels had seen enough to develop a hardened view of the world. He had long ago grown comfortable with making assumptions about people based on how they looked. To him, Tyrell was just another young black man on the streets, a potential threat to the system. Though Daniels had served as an officer, his perspective on law and justice had been clouded by prejudice. He often saw young black men as criminals before ever giving them a chance to prove otherwise. His position of power gave him a sense of control, and it was something he carried with him every time he patrolled the streets. What Daniels didn't know was that one day he would meet the wrong person, and his assumptions would not only shatter his own image, but also serve as a powerful reminder of the dangers of prejudice. The relationship between Tyrell and Officer Daniels was built on the same foundation as so many others in the community: prejudice, assumptions, and stereotypes. Officer Daniels had pulled over dozens of young black men for trivial reasons, and his bias often led him to treat them with disdain. He didn't need to know their story. To him, they were all the same. It was a harsh reality, but Daniels was blind to it. Tyrell, on the other hand, had never been treated with fairness. He had always been seen through the lens of others' biases, whether it was at school, in the streets, or in the community. But Tyrell never let it define him. His strength came from knowing who he was, from knowing that his future was in his hands. When their paths crossed, Tyrell would find himself forced to deal with Daniel's unfair treatment in a way that would not only change their lives, but the lives of others who had ever been judged based on appearance alone. It all began on a Wednesday evening, with Tyrell leaving football practice, his body sore, but his spirit determined. The sun had already begun to set, and the streets of the neighborhood were starting to quiet down. Tyrell was on his way to meet his mother, who worked late, and the last thing he wanted was to get into trouble. He kept his head down, focused on the path ahead, when suddenly the loud siren of a police car pierced the air. Before Tyrell could even process what was happening, the car screeched to a halt just a few feet away from him. Officer Daniels jumped out, his boots hitting the pavement with a sense of finality. He had his hand on his belt, and Tyrell could already tell that this was no ordinary stop. "What's going on here?" Daniels barked. His eyes scanned Tyrell from head to toe, sizing him up with what seemed like judgment in every glance. Tyrell took a deep breath and said, "I'm just heading home, officer." Daniels' expression remained cold. "What's in the bag, huh?" "It's just football gear," Tyrell said, his voice calm. He had no idea why he was being stopped, but had learned over time that arguing with police wasn't worth it. It only made things worse. Daniels narrowed his eyes. "Football gear, huh? Is that what you're calling it?" he scoffed. "Let's see your ID." Tyrell was confused. Why was he being treated like this? He hadn't done anything wrong. He wasn't breaking the law. He had every right to walk down the street, but Daniels wasn't hearing it. When Tyrell hesitated, Daniels' posture stiffened. "You got something to hide, boy?" The officer reached for his handcuffs, slapping them on Tyrell's wrist with an authority that felt like a slap to his dignity. Tyrell's chest tightened. He didn't fight back. His heart raced, but he stayed calm. He knew arguing would get him nowhere. But as Daniels dragged him toward the squad car, Tyrell's mind raced. The unfairness of it all, the way his life had been reduced to nothing more than a simple stereotype. He wasn't just angry, he was fighting for something deeper. His identity, his dignity, his future. He had worked too hard to let a man like Daniels strip him of his worth. Suddenly something clicked in Tyrell's mind. "I'm not just some random kid on the street. I've earned the right to be here." He wasn't just a teenager caught up in some false allegation. He was Tyrell Thompson, a soon-to-be star athlete with a future that extended far beyond the streets of this city. With one swift movement, Tyrell slipped his handcuffs off, using his athletic skills honed over years of practice. In one fluid motion, he stood tall and faced the officer. Daniels was stunned. "What the hell?" he blurted, his eyes wide with disbelief. Tyrell stood up straight and met his gaze. "You really don't know who I am, do you?" he asked calmly, his voice steady. Daniels blinked in confusion, his grip tightening on his baton. "No, I don't know who you are." Tyrell stood firm, not backing down. "I'm Tyrell Thompson." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. "I'm a full scholarship athlete to the University of Alabama. I've got my future ahead of me, and it's way bigger than whatever assumptions you've made about me." Daniel's face fell as reality began to sink in. This wasn't just some random teenager. This wasn't just a kid from the streets. Tyrell Thompson was a future professional athlete. Suddenly, the officer felt like the world was spinning. He had made a terrible mistake. The power dynamic shifted in an instant. Tyrell, once the object of Daniels' judgment and authority, was now the one with control. The officer was standing there, completely exposed, realizing that his assumptions about Tyrell had been nothing more than a reflection of his own prejudice. Tyrell wasn't just a teenager. He was a young man with potential, someone whose worth had never been tied to the assumptions that others had placed on him. He had been underestimated his entire life, but now, with every word he spoke, he was showing Daniels and the world that you cannot judge a book by its cover. Tyrell's words weren't just for the officer. They were for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. They were a call for change. "If I can make it, so can you." Officer Daniels, still shaken, muttered, "I didn't know." But it didn't matter. The damage had been done. The humiliation Tyrell had faced was not something he would let slide. Tyrell walked away that night with a sense of vindication. He didn't just beat the ticket, he won a battle for his dignity, for the truth that had always been ignored by people like Officer Daniels. His story quickly went viral, sparking debates on social media about prejudice and how young black men are treated in America. The entire community stood with Tyrell. His story was a reminder that assumptions can destroy lives, and that sometimes the very system that is supposed to protect us is the one that needs to be held accountable. Officer Daniels faced an internal investigation. His actions were scrutinized, and he was eventually forced to face the consequences of his prejudice. he would never forget the name Tyrell Thompson, the young man who had turned the tables and shown him that you don't define people by the color of their skin. Tyrell, now a rising football star, went on to make his mark on the field. His career flourished, and with every game he played, he carried the lessons of that night with him. He wasn't just playing football, he was playing for every person who had been underestimated, every person who had been written off before they even had a chance to prove their worth. How often do we judge others based on the assumptions we make about them? Tyrell's story teaches us that no one should ever be defined by their appearance or background. No one should ever be underestimated. If you stand strong, if you speak up, you can change your future and the future of others around you. Our worth is not determined by others' biases. It's defined by the strength we show in the face of adversity. Have you ever been judged or underestimated because of the way you look or where you come from? How did you prove those assumptions wrong? If you were inspired by Tyrell's story, like and share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories of resilience, justice, and overcoming the odds. Because when you stand up for yourself, the world takes notice. Stay tuned for more powerful stories dropping tomorrow.